Every living thing you have ever known, every empire that has risen and fallen, and every breath humanity has ever taken, has occurred on a tiny blue marble drifting aimlessly through the void. For billions of years, our solar system has been a passenger in the Milky Way, tossed around by the invisible gravitational currents of the galaxy like a ship without a rudder. We always believed the vastness of space was our protector, a silent, empty buffer that kept us safe. But by the year 2300, our deep space infrared telescopes pierced the veil and discovered a terrifying truth. A rogue black hole, a collapsed star with the mass of 10 suns, is drifting on a collision course. It is invisible, silent, and moving at a speed that defies logic. In less than 5 centuries, it will enter our gravitational well, tearing the planets from their orbits and swallowing our sun whole. There is no planet to flee to, and no fleet of ships large enough to evacuate 10 billion souls. We were faced with a choice: accept the extinction of the human race or do the impossible. We decided to stop being passengers. We decided to take the helm of the solar system and move the sun itself. The physics of the Shkadov Thruster seem like the fever dream of a madman. How do you push a star that contains 99% of the mass of our entire system? The answer is as elegant as it is terrifying. It is a megastructure of such staggering scale that it makes the Great Pyramids look like grains of sand. We call it the Golden Mirror. It is a gargantuan parabolic reflector, thousands of kilometers wide but thinner than a human hair, positioned in a permanent stationary orbit above the sun's north pole. By reflecting the sun's own intense radiation and light back toward its surface, we create a tiny, constant amount of thrust, a solar recoil. It is the ultimate cosmic sail. This infinitesimal push, maintained over decades, begins to shift the sun's path through the galaxy. And because every planet, from Mercury to Neptune, is locked to the sun by the unbreakable chains of gravity, where the sun goes, we go. We are turning our entire solar system into a giant cosmic arc, sailing away from a black hole and into the unknown depths of the stars. This is the story of how humanity became the pilots of the heavens. To build a mirror capable of moving a star, humanity had to become a planetary predator. The Shkadov Thruster required more reflective material than could be found in every asteroid and moon in the inner solar system combined. We needed iron, nickel, and aluminum on a scale that defied imagination. There was only one logical source: the planet Mercury. It was a brutal, calculated decision. To save the lives of billions on Earth and Mars, we had to systematically dismantle the smallest planet in our system, turning its entire mass into a swarm of mirrors. The process began with the arrival of the World Eaters, automated mining swarms that descended upon Mercury's scorched surface. These weren't the drills of the past. They were massive solar-powered excavators that stripped the crust mile by mile, vaporizing rock and refining metal in a continuous, terrifying loop. Mercury, once a world of craters and ancient silence, became a giant, glowing construction site. From the surface, the sky was permanently filled with thousands of transport ships, carrying the refined materials toward the sun's north pole. We were literally unmaking a world to ensure the survival of our own. As the planet grew smaller, the gravitational balance of the inner solar system began to shift. We had to deploy stabilizing thrusters on Venus and the Moon just to keep their orbits from wobbling. But the most difficult part wasn't the engineering, it was the realization of what we were doing. We were the first generation of humans to erase a planet from the maps. As the last mountain of Mercury was ground into dust and launched into space, a haunting realization set in. There was no going back. The Golden Mirror was now a reality, a shimmering, gossamer web of Mercury's remains, hanging over the sun like a crown of glass. The first time the mirror was fully deployed, the sun's light hit it with the force of 1 trillion nuclear bombs. The mirror didn't melt. It vibrated, singing a low metallic note that could be felt through the sensors of every ship in the system. The thrust was infinitesimal at first, a mere fraction of a millimeter per second. But it was working. For the first time in 4 billion years, the sun was no longer drifting. It was being pushed. We had traded a planet for a rudder, and the long journey away from the black hole had finally begun. We treated the sun as an engine, but we quickly learned that our star is a violent and unpredictable titan. In the 3rd decade of the project, the sun began what the engineers called the solar rebellion. By placing the Golden Mirror over the sun's north pole, we had inadvertently altered the star's magnetic flux. The sun's natural cycle was disrupted, and it responded with a series of coronal mass ejections, more powerful than any in recorded history. These weren't just solar flares, they were gargantuan loops of plasma, millions of kilometers long, lashing out at the mirror like the tentacles of a trapped beast. The Shkadov Thruster was designed to reflect light, but it was incredibly fragile. A single direct hit from a high-energy plasma burst would vaporize the gossamer-thin material instantly, leaving our solar system adrift once again in the path of the approaching black hole. I remember the night the great flare hit. From the observation decks on Mars, the sun appeared to grow a second skin, of jagged electric violet. The magnetic interference was so intense that it knocked out global communications on Earth, plunging our homeworld into a terrifying silence, just as the mirror began to buckle. The crews stationed on the support swarm, the fleet of ships responsible for maintaining the mirror, their lives to protect the thin veil of Mercury's remains that stood between humanity and extinction. As the flares subsided, the golden mirror was scarred and blackened, but it remained intact. The sun had tested our resolve and found it unbreakable. We realized then that moving a star wasn't just a matter of engineering. It was a matter of endurance. We were no longer just building a machine, we were engaged in a physical struggle with the very source of our life. The mirror was repaired, the magnetic stabilizers were reinforced, and the sun continued its slow, forced march away from the encroaching darkness. We had tamed the fire, but the cost was written in the stars. As the Shkadov Thruster continued its relentless push, a strange and haunting transformation began to settle over our solar system. For the first time in 4 billion years, we were no longer following the familiar circular orbit around the galactic center. We were breaking away. We were entering the great loneliness, the vast empty void between the spiral arms. On Earth and Mars, the night sky began to change in ways that were both beautiful and terrifying. Familiar constellations that guided human explorers for millennia began to warp and stretch as we changed our perspective on the stars. Eventually, those stars began to fade entirely. The sky became a canvas of absolute velvety blackness. For children born during this era, a starry night was something they only saw in digital archives or ancient textbooks. When they looked up through Earth's atmosphere, they saw the infinite, crushing dark of the intergalactic vacuum. This deep space ghosting had a profound psychological effect on humanity. We felt like cosmic orphans, drifting in a sea of nothingness, held together only by the gravity of our sun. The physical changes were just as radical. The solar system was bombarded by exotic types of interstellar radiation. The Oort cloud and Kuiper belt began to glow with a faint ghostly aurora as the sun's heliosphere brushed against the cold gases. We had to build massive planetary shields, gigantic magnetic rings orbiting Earth and Mars, to prevent our atmospheres from being stripped away. Life inside the solar system became inward-looking. Without the stars to guide us, we focused entirely on the golden mirror. It was our only lighthouse in the dark. I remember standing on the lunar surface, looking back at the sun. It no longer looked like a warm provider. It looked like a flickering candle in a dark cathedral. We were moving at 300 kilometers per second, yet it felt like we were standing still in an ocean of shadow. We were a civilization in transit, a nomad species carrying our entire home into the unknown. We had escaped the black hole, but in doing so we had traded the safety of the galaxy for the terrifying freedom of the abyss. The great loneliness lasted for 3 centuries. For 300 years, humanity lived in the shadow of a star that was being pushed through the dark. But then, the sensors began to hum with a new kind of energy. We had successfully bypassed the trajectory of the rogue black hole. We were safe, but we were also lost. That was until the Shkadov Thruster's long-range scanners picked up a signature we hadn't seen in generations. The light of a stable yellow dwarf star, sitting in a pristine, untouched corner of the Perseus arm. We had found a new neighborhood. The final maneuver was the most delicate in human history. To stop a moving solar system, you cannot simply turn off the engine. We had to rotate the golden mirror, that gargantuan relic of Mercury's remains, 180 degrees. For a decade, we used the sun's own light to act as a brake, slowing our multi-trillion-ton arc as we approached our new home. As we drifted into the gravitational embrace of the new sector, the deep space ghosting finally ended. One by one, new stars began to appear in our sky. They weren't the stars of our ancestors, but they were bright, constant, and welcoming. We were no longer orphans. I stood on the observation deck of the Mars orbital ring as we made our final approach. Below me, the red planet was beginning to change. The micro-terraforming we had started centuries ago had taken hold. Small patches of blue water and green lichen were visible through the thinning dust. But the most incredible sight was the golden mirror itself. After centuries of service, its surface was pitted by interstellar dust and scorched by solar fire. It had been our shield, our engine, and our salvation. As the AI slowly began to dismantle the mirror, returning its metals to the system to build new orbital habitats, I realized that the Shkadov Thruster was more than just a machine. It was the monument of a species that refused to accept extinction. Humanity has been forever changed by the Great Journey. We are no longer a civilization that fears the cosmos. We have learned that if the universe presents us with a path to destruction, we have the power to forge a new path of our own. We didn't just move a sun. We moved the definition of what is possible. The children of this new era look up at a sky filled with unfamiliar stars, but they do so with a confidence that their ancestors never possessed. They know that home isn't a fixed point in the galaxy. Home is wherever we choose to take it. As the last piece of the golden mirror was recycled into the new lunar shipyards, the sun settled into its new orbit. For the first time in nearly 400 years, the engines were silent. The solar rebellion was over. We have entered a new era of peace, powered by the same star that once threatened to incinerate us. We are the architects of the heavens, the pilots of the sun, and the masters of our own destiny. The journey through the dark is over, but our exploration of this new frontier has only just begun. We are home,